What now and what next? I can't get Lisa out of my head. Since last night, everything in my life has changed. How could it be otherwise? What happened was so unexpected, exciting, and frightening. Maybe I'm exaggerating the significance of what happened at the Donaldsons' dinner. Perhaps some part of me was expecting this to happen, and then it happened. What does this tell me about myself? My husband Jim and I knew many of the guests at the barbecue and were looking forward to meeting them. I begged him not to get drunk and to be able to take us home. For several years now, life with my husband has felt like falling into an abyss. Our teenagers are well aware that something is wrong and ask me, "What happened?" I couldn't explain it to them. As our marriage faded, Jim's waist expanded until his generous folds of fat hung over his belt and peeked out from under his sports jacket. For now, all our marital problems faded into the background as we walked around the Donaldsons' yard. An ideal evening for a casual dinner, those who chose to bring swimsuits had the opportunity to take a dip in the pool. The huge glowing orange ball of sunset gave way to a full moon, and the sweet smell of lilacs wafted everywhere. Smoke from the barbecue rose and swirled in the air, matching the rhythm of the recorded dance music. Even Jim took my hand and we danced to one of the tunes, but then I realized that his hand on my waist was like a stick stuck in the mud, and his touch reminded me that we had not made love in months. One dance was enough, and I stepped aside to chat with old acquaintances while slowly sipping a glass of cheap Merlot. It was one of the Donaldsons' biggest parties, but even so I managed to talk to almost everyone. Guests sat in small groups, tilted dinner plates on their laps and glasses of wine at their feet. I didn't sit next to Jim, but joined two couples I didn't know very well, but had already met. We reintroduced ourselves to each other, slowly eating a perfectly cooked steak, with one of my favorite sides, German potato salad made not with mayonnaise, but with vinegar and oil dressing. I sat next to Lisa, whom I had met briefly at a private investment banking conference. Then she made some really interesting remarks. I was amazed by her beauty, intelligence, and self-confidence. The predominantly male audience perked up when she stood up and said she disagreed with the investment model being discussed. She did not mince words. Lisa said that she considers the presented model nonsense that is not even suitable for stupid info advertising. Bam! Everyone in the room realized that Lisa was not one to give in. I spoke next, supporting her conclusions. At the end of the one-day event, she came up to me, thanked me for my thoughts, and added, "Maybe one day we can meet and develop our ideas about investment banking." And I thought that would be nice, but I didn't continue, and Lisa same. However, in the days and weeks that followed, I often thought about her endurance, strength, how eloquent, attractive, and feminine she was. She made a strong impression on me, and added to this was a growing sense of attraction. And so we sat next to each other, chatted, smiled, and chewed. She introduced me to her husband Sandy, a strikingly handsome, tall, tan talker. I thought, what a sexy, confident couple. I couldn't help but notice her long legs, emphasized by black tights, the discreet but seductive cut of the jacket with a hint of the absence of a bra underneath, the makeup that emphasized her round lips and warm eyes. What was I thinking? What was I saying to myself? What emotions was I experiencing while the blush was filling my face? It was Lisa who made me feel, well, I admitted it to myself, without a doubt, excited, and for some reason I felt like she could read my reaction to her. I was lost in my feelings and didn't even listen to our small conversation, trying not to stare at her, and suddenly, Lisa broke the spell. She whispered in my ear, "Why don't we pick up where we left off at this stupid investment conference? Why don't we take a walk around the garden and talk about investing strategies and men and women?" She took my hand, helped me get up, and we left. Lisa seemed to talk incessantly, and I listened. You know, investment banking is all about seduction, about promises whispered into willing ears, about the romance of what the future will bring, and the result is a fascination with what the future may bring, romances with the flesh and the bank account. Do you agree? I was intoxicated by her words and thoughts, and by herself. I never thought about the connections between investment banking, romance, sexual attraction, but it all really makes sense, and looking back now, It all seemed so logical. Lisa hugged my waist. You know, Sue, you're very attractive, smart, and I hope you won't be offended if I say this, but you're also very sensual. Do you know this about yourself, or is my perception of your personality a mystery to you? I was stunned and disarmed and answered almost stuttering, but before I realized what I was saying. Lisa, it was so long ago that I felt sexy, desired, a woman. I was about to continue, but Lisa stopped me, turned me around to face me, and looked straight into my eyes. I somehow suspected this, seeing you with your husband, and what a terrible feeling it is, what a waste, a tragedy. She leaned over and kissed me on the cheek and said, "It doesn't have to be like this. Life is too short, and who we are and who we want to become requires space to grow, and if this is not there, then what is our life even about?" And one more thought, a question actually. Have you ever been with a woman? I mean, really been with a woman, not just drinking tea or talking about children, but actually being with a woman. And I mean, have you ever really been with a woman in all her living and fully open essence? And then she fell silent and just stood there, looking at me. Sue, I'm sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable. I didn't mean to, but somehow I felt the need to say what I thought about you and respond to what I saw in you, part of what you could imagine, feel, and am I wrong about this? It was like I knew you imagined what it would be like to be with a woman. Women react to women very differently than men. They touch each other differently, are much more aware of themselves and their partner than most men are generally capable of. A woman's kiss is different from a man's kiss. Well, if not, would you like to try it, to find out what that sensation might be? My knees were ready to give in, my head was spinning from a stream of thoughts, I was stunned, I was out of breath, but fear gripped me, and I knew that Lisa knew how I felt, all of this. Lisa put her arm around my waist and continued, I guess I've alarmed you, haven't I? Let me ask you a few questions that you don't have to answer. Do you want me to kiss you, really kiss you, here now, where no one can see us? You're curious, no, you're excited to know what it will be like, and you don't have to answer or nod or shake your head. I was barely breathing, but I whispered as if I was screaming, begging her. Please stop, and I want to kiss you, and all this is overwhelming me, and Lisa, I don't know what to say, what to do. I'm paralyzed, like a deer caught in the headlights, and part of me wants to run as fast as I can, and before I could continue, she kissed me. When suddenly her husband Sandy appeared, stopped, looking at us, he smiled, and then came over and hugged us both together. Sandy, still smiling, spoke to both of us. It seems, Lisa, that you have met Susan. Don't you think we should invite her to our house so we can continue our acquaintance? I nodded. Yes, but this whole thing scares me so much, not just Lisa, but now you too. You who seem to know what was going to happen, and I'm so confused. Lisa responded gently, holding my hand. Sue, take your time, and we won't hurt you or make you feel anything you don't want to feel. We can talk about this later. Fine? And I simply answered, yes, later. Tomorrow, and then what? Should we have known it would end this way, a passion set free with no way back, a train wreck that could have been prevented? Did we even have an election given how we felt? I asked these questions to Jen. She agreed that what could happen when our secrets, which we initially kept from each other, came out without the possibility of erasing them, and how it would all develop was bad. It was inevitable that her husband would find out about everything. All the secrets would come out, become public knowledge, and Jen knew she couldn't stop talking, telling everything, and of course I had to tell my wife about Jen too. It all started with simple innocent flirting. It was a welcome distraction while we worked together on a modeling project for the biochemistry division of Ajax Pharmaceuticals. Maybe flirting is never just fun and games, but we just smiled, enjoyed it, and continued working on our project together. Our pampering actually helped us get through our work. It took some of the pressure off of workload, deadlines, the kind of pressure that can drive you crazy. Jen and I, oh, my name is Rick, were colleagues, and we were always expected to make decisions, especially when tens of millions of dollars were at stake. This is not the first time we have collaborated on a project. Last year, we published 2 scientific papers together, and by then we knew each other well, sharing stories about our families, about our childhoods, about the experiences that played an important role in shaping our lives. Jen, her husband and children met with my wife Sue and my son Jim several times so we could introduce the faces of our world. Tomorrow evening, we will be together at a scientific conference in Chicago. Tonight was our last chance to do the final editing of our presentation. It was already late. Sitting next to each other, looking at the projector screen in front of the conference table, our knees touched and stayed that way. Jen whispered, "I'm a little nervous about tomorrow. I think our findings will stand up to scrutiny, but, oh well." I assured her, "Listen, Jen, we know what we have and what we don't have completed, and who else in the room is better versed in our research than we are?" And I stroked her cheek, repeating what I had told her many times before. "You are the best of the best. Your mathematical modeling of the effects of drugs is the envy of our scientific community. You are the best," and then leaned down and hugged her. But this time he didn't let go. Instead, he held her. Once again, I was overwhelmed by her signature spicy sweet scent and felt my nostrils flutter, so I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I felt her warmth. I held back, but not completely, and whispered, "Oh, Jen, you're the best, and I can't imagine working here without you." But I wanted to say so much more. Jen pulled away from me, holding my hands in hers, and just looked, saying nothing. And then, when our faces were almost touching, she whispered back, "And I can't imagine life without you." I just had to say this, which I think you already knew, or at least guessed. The silence that followed lasted for minutes as we sat holding hands, lost in our shared thoughts. What's going on? We knew, and what we wanted was so easy to imagine. It flowed naturally in our minds. We understood that the place we were going to was dangerous and exciting, and we thought about what could happen if. Can we stop ourselves? And then I thought about our families, our spouses, her 2 children, my eldest son, and then my thoughts went back to us, to this evening, and then to tomorrow, to our presentations, together, away from our families, together, touching each other, her scent, my hands in hers, our eyes looking at each other, asking questions, reaching out to each other. Finally, Jen broke the silence. "What should we do? What's going on? And doesn't it sound like a cliché of what can happen at work? And yet what I feel is so real that even if it seems trivial, I can't ignore it." And she didn't finish her thought. I didn't know what we should do or not do other than say, "I want you so bad I might explode." Jen interrupted me and whispered, her face almost touching mine. "How do you want to touch me? Tell me. What do you want to do? What would you do first if you could, if we could, if I?" And she fell silent, dropping her head on my shoulder. We kissed. Suddenly, we heard the cleaning cart stop in front of the conference room door. The lock turned, and the face that looked inside froze when it saw us. But quickly enough to break our kiss, we pulled away from each other. When the door closed, we hugged again and continued the kiss. How could we stop when neither of us desperately wanted to? Jen slowly whispered, her eyes filling with tears, "Rick, what would you do if we could? What would you do? What would we do together if it were possible? Can we let our fantasies fly? And will this be enough for us to tame our passion? Can imagining how we are free to do what we want be enough?" Jen, you know that voicing what we want from each other only makes it harder to stop, and maybe that's why you suggested it. You don't want to stop, and I'm screaming inside, "No, don't let it end here." Rick, I need to get to know all of you, Rick, who is losing control around me. There are so many things I can't put into words. They don't convey everything I feel. They both sat there, silently, together, and at the same time separately. Everyone was immersed in their own thoughts about life, about spouses, children, friends. Rick imagined the horror that would follow his confession to his wife, Sue, that he had an affair that he did not want to break. He could hear his children crying and his wife sitting in the living room with tears in her eyes, and then he could clearly imagine the anger that would follow. After Sue's encounter with Lisa, a quiet dog seemed to envelop her as she moved slowly, thinking about what had happened, trying to push it out of her thoughts, to hide it in some corner of her mind, but also to keep it safe, out of sight. No tricks helped Sue, and she could not get that evening out of her head. Rick, who seemed to spend most of his time away from her, didn't notice anything. But then again, perhaps there was nothing unusual about Sue, although he did notice that she seemed distracted. Not here. Sue kept a mental journal of events and thoughts in her head. She thought to herself, is it really that obvious that something is going on and I don't want to talk about it? Over breakfast on Wednesday, after dinner at the Donaldsons, Rick started talking about that evening. Well, it looks like you really enjoyed meeting Rick and Lisa. You disappeared with them for almost the entire evening. I was a little worried when I didn't see you. Then I started wandering around the Donaldsons' garden and saw you there, deep in conversation with Lisa. Then I noticed her husband joining you and decided to return to the others. In any case, I didn't want to interfere. It seemed to me that you wanted to be alone with them. Sue thought about it. But why don't you join us? They are such a cute and really interesting couple. It's not like you to be shy about meeting new people. Rick replied, yes, that's true, but somehow it seemed to me that you were so engaged in conversation that I didn't want to break the spell. Sue listened as Rick continued, mumbling more to herself as she spread butter on her toast, but was completely lost in thought. Did Rick notice anything? Anything in the expressions on Lisa and I's faces? Anything that could hint that something more is going on? No, of course, that's unlikely. Sue was again worried about the growing emotional distance between her and Rick. Maybe it's just a habit that the spark has left their relationship, and maybe that's normal, but so what? This is not what she wanted, and then she wondered if perhaps it was Rick who was moving away from her. There's so much to think about with no easy answers. So they continued to have breakfast, each of them reading the newspaper, without talking or looking at each other together, and at the same time again separately. Oh, honey, Rick paused on his way to the sink with a cup of coffee. Honey, I forgot to tell you, but I have to leave for a meeting next Friday, and I won't be back until Sunday evening. What a shame. I'll have to work again on the weekends with people I basically can't stand. And of course, it's not fair to you to leave you alone again. I hope you understand. I know you do. I can't give this up. And my automatic response did not sound at all as intended. Of course, dear, I understand. I always understand. As it turns out, Danny will go to your parents, which will be a joy for him, and it will give me something to do. By the way, Lisa called yesterday and invited us to a cocktail party this weekend, but I didn't say yes because I didn't know our plans. They might be people you'd like to meet when you get back. Maybe I'll even call Lisa and Sandy and go see them this weekend while you're gone to get a preview of what they're like. If I think you like them, then we can invite them to join us when you return. Rick replied without thinking too much about it. Of course. Great idea. Sue was surprised at how hard her heart began to beat, how she felt a flush on her cheeks, excitement, but why and what was happening, and then she thought, but maybe being alone with them, without Rick, would be a dangerous thing to do. Of course, she couldn't wait until evening to call Lisa. The phone rang and Lisa answered. Hi, Lisa. How are you and Sandy? You know, you both made a big impression on me when we met again at the Donaldsons' party. You suggested that we meet. Well, so I'm calling, although. Well, I have to admit, that evening I was a little confused, and for a long time after that I couldn't stop thinking about it. And even now, thinking about this, I feel out of place, and I think you understand that, but maybe not. Sue, I know you were uncomfortable that evening. I completely understand this, but you should know that I was amazed by you. I saw in you someone more courageous and adventurous than she allowed herself to be. I saw something in you just below the surface that needed to be released, to be allowed to breathe, and so I took a chance. Well, I hope I didn't offend you or act more inappropriately than I thought. You should know that I don't regret that night, and neither does Sandy, and I hope you're okay with what happened. Lisa was stunned. No trying to hide in a corner or pretend nothing happened. Everything was under the scorching sun. What happened that evening cannot be ignored. No wonder Sue was silent for so long. Sue, are you still here? Have I upset you? If yes, then forgive me. Oh no, Lisa, it's okay. You just left me again without words and without breathing. I also wanted to tell you that I think Rick will enjoy meeting you both. When he returns from his business trip, we could plan something together if it would also be nice for you. Rick said he'd like to meet you and Sandy and surprised me by suggesting that if you had time, we could have a little get-together and then I could kind of give him a trailer, a sneak peek, a portrait of Lisa and Sandy. I was a little surprised that he made such an offer because Rick is usually a controlling person and… Lisa interrupted Sue. We'd love to invite you for a cocktail while Rick is away. We are free on Friday evening or Sunday afternoon. Will it suit you? If yes, we can send you the address. I know roughly where you live, and it's almost within walking distance from us. Sue was delighted with the invitation, although her stomach turned over. Friday night will be perfect. My son will be picked up by his grandparents around 4, and after that I can walk to your house. That would be great, Sue, and tell Rick we'll take care of you. They said goodbye, and only then Sue thought about meeting, but she was also a little taken aback by Lisa's invitation and her manner of communication, as if they were old friends and not new acquaintances. Sue suggested that an open, relaxed, warm way of communicating was Lisa's style, both with her and with others. But how can you forget those few intimate moments together? Of course, she understood that this invitation was a continuation of those moments. She felt her blush rise, her breathing quicken, and she had to sit down for a minute to collect her thoughts. Is it worth accepting this invitation? It's Friday night and Rick's parents are picking up their 12-year-old Bobby. Hugs, light conversation, a bag of treats for the trip to their place and flowers for the mother-in-law. She returned to the house and changed clothes. What to wear? Should she choose Elizabeth Ashley's neutral style to blend in with the late summer colors, or should she take the risk of dressing in a way that makes her look, well, sexy? She dressed consciously and deliberately, constantly glancing in the mirror. Usually Sue didn't pay much attention to her choice of bra and panties, but not today. Rummaging through her dresser, she pulled out a sexy pair of sheer panties and a matching supportive bra, and wondered why she was so particular about her underwear. She decided to wear sheer tights and a short skirt with a fitted but conservative top, and then opted for her dressy low heels. It was still early enough that Sue decided she had time to walk to Lisa and Sandy's house. A 15-minute walk would give her a chance to think and get some exercise. Sue walked up to a modern house with beautiful landscaping. At the entrance to Lisa and Sandy's driveway sat their Art Nouveau mailbox with the name Ackerman in large letters. Sue took a deep breath, looked around again, and then rang the doorbell. She heard footsteps inside and Lisa opened the door. Sue, welcome. Come on in. Lisa took Sue's hand, kissed her lightly on both cheeks, and then led her into the living room. Sue was struck by the beauty of the room, almost completely surrounded by windows that let in daylight, making the whole room glow as if from within. There was little modern furniture in the room, and it was so minimalist that it seemed almost empty. The space was filled only by the unusual art hanging on the walls between glass panels. Sue always loved art and knew a lot about art history and the 20th century masters. She immediately recognized Emil Nolde's small watercolor seascape. Lisa, this room is amazing, and the art, wow. Can I ask where you got that Nolde print because it looks real? Lisa laughed. He's real. We bought it 15 years ago at an auction, where we realized that no one realized the value of the painting or much about this artist. I'm a little surprised that you immediately recognized that it was Nolde. Sue told Lisa about her long-standing interest in art and her many failed attempts at painting and drawing. She also mentioned that she works full-time in the investment department of a local bank and that her role as a mother takes up most of her time. But what saddens me most is that my husband, Rick, doesn't appreciate my interest in art, not just collecting, but creating it. Sue continued to talk about Rick, painting a portrait of a loving father, his warmth, kindness, and his considerable talents as a biochemist who develops drugs for one of the largest international pharmaceutical companies. They truly value his contributions to the company's research department, as evidenced by his continued promotions and new and more complex projects. Sue was about to continue, but Lisa interrupted her. We'll get back to Rick, but what about you? Tell me more about yourself and your life. Isn't it fun, like a game of show and tell, to do a biographical show and tell? Sue began to tell Lisa a little about her life, but thought about the phrase show and tell. What did Lisa mean by using this rather simple expression? Perhaps it meant something more than just the traditional use of the expression. Sue talked about growing up in a middle-class family in Baltimore, doing well in school, going to community colleges at Goucher and Johns Hopkins, meeting Rick at a benefit for the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, dating him, having one child, a wonderful son, but then she was told that she could not have any more children. She spoke of her disappointment and desire to adopt another child, but Rick was reluctant to do so because he believed it would be a kind of genetic lottery, and somehow convinced her to give up the idea. She also described how she immersed herself in her role as a mother while continuing to develop her professional skills in the banking industry. She even surprised herself when she suddenly blurted out that she felt unfinished. Yes, I feel that I am not where I want to be, and that my personal path seems stuck in the sands of the desert. Wow, did I really say that? Lisa squeezed Sue's hand in hers and whispered, You really said that, and I think that's what you feel. And while it doesn't feel good to feel stuck, adrift, and possibly alone, I also feel like you're not helpless. You have the strength that will allow you to fly above the desert and go to new places. Feeling helpless when we have all sorts of resources is often exactly what we need. Lisa leaned over and hugged Sue, kissing her forehead. Sue was touched by Lisa's gentle encouragement and simply sat and looked around the garden and then stared at Lisa, who simply smiled back. The light in the garden was slowly fading, there was no ice left in the cocktails, and the cheese, crackers, and olives were almost untouched. Lisa, what about you and Sandy? What are your life stories? I guess this is the short version of your biographies. And that's when Sandy came into the garden, sat down, and put his drink on the glass table. You know, Sue, I always find it interesting and revealing when Lisa presents a kind of movie trailer about who she is, who I am, and who we are together as a couple. What I love about her view of us is that it is constantly changing. Lisa seemed to enjoy being the center of attention as she began the story of Lisa and Sandy, told by narrator Lisa. Well, in the beginning, there was a little girl who grew up in an upper-class apartment on Riverside Drive in New York. There was a Papa Bear who was a lawyer and sometimes a politician, a Mama Bear who was a debutante and continued to play the part even after she became the mother of adult children. They had a little bear brother who was a playful pain in the ass, but grew up to be an amazing guy and a reporter for the Times of London. And then there was me, who always liked to test my limits in a variety of situations, including all the time spent in a fancy private school that I hated along with the children who went there. I met Sandy after graduating from Wharton University while working on Wall Street. Private equity firm Sandy was born in Frankfurt, Germany, to Israeli parents who worked there. When he was 8 years old, the family moved to New York, and Sandy Sanford, his Americanized name, was a very smart child who eventually attended Berkeley and entered the United States. Invented his own specialty that combined the disciplines of economics, brain science, and anthropology. Can you believe this combination will work? Well, it certainly helped Sandy, who took a job of his choice and chose economic development in third world countries, which he still does today, along with many projects that are more than just a hobby. Sandy was the most brilliant guy I've ever met, but at the same time a man who was no match for anyone but his own. We have been married for 19 years and have 2 wonderful children, a 13-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy who both go to school. So here it is, but who and what we are is not visible in any of these biographies, but is revealed slowly as others poke around our psyche. Sandy clapped his hands. Bravo. Like you said, this is all very brief and doesn't reveal anything. Lisa, you're so good at this, so good at subtle teasing, lifting the layers, and just outlining what might just be next. Sue laughed out loud. Sandy's cell phone rang, and he stood up and moved into another room. A few minutes later, he returned. Now, I really must apologize, but I will have to disappear for a while. I wouldn't leave you, but it's urgent. Lisa, why don't you ask Sue to stay for dinner, and I can join you later? Sue was surprised by her feelings. She was both excited and anxious, knowing she would be alone with Lisa, and then took a deep breath to calm herself down. Lisa smiled. Let's talk and continue our mini-biographies, and don't worry, nothing will happen that will make you uncomfortable. And by the way, real intimacy is about touching those places within us that are personal, especially those that are our personal inner voices. Sue was shocked by these words, but did not show it. At least she thought so. She was surprised by her feeling of relief, but also of disappointment. Sue knew how to hide and disguise her private thoughts, fantasies, emotions, but she also suspected that Lisa saw much more about her inner life than anyone she had ever met, and more than what she told her husband Rick. This may have had a double meaning, as she often felt that the real Rick was unknown to her. Sue spoke, and Lisa listened and asked questions. Even more surprises. Even Lisa's timing seemed right. Lisa stood up and stretched. That's enough for now. Sue, let's go inside and I'll make us dinner. How about a salad with smoked turkey chunks, and you like anchovies, avocado, and make a really nice salad dressing with balsamic vinegar, olives, etc. Oil, black pepper, oregano, but no garlic, and I have some aged cheddar, which goes perfectly with sourdough bread. How does that sound? Lisa, that would be great, and I would be happy to help you. Can I do this? Lisa smiled and replied, No need. Just keep me company while I mumble. Sue thought to herself, oh, no garlic, and then became aware, in some superconscious way, of everything happening around her. It seemed to her that all the pores of her mind had opened, absorbing all of Lisa's words and gestures. Sue thought there were a few other people alive, but losing their balance around Lisa. Lisa chuckled to herself and smiled widely at Sue. Sue, tell me what you thought when I said no garlic. Did you think that it would somehow ruin the taste of such a kiss? And she leaned over and hugged Sue and kissed her. I think the garlic might have ruined the taste. What do you think? Lisa felt relieved by the humor and began to laugh, but stopped. You know, Lisa, you, of course, know I feel broken, adrift, strange, and yes, I'm going to such foreign places for me, unknown, scary, wonderful, and tasty, and without garlic. Lisa laughed and couldn't stop, and Sue blushed and looked away. Sue, I'm not making fun of you at all. You should know this. I smile at your innocence, your charm. It reminds me of my fulfilling youth and the time when I felt the need to introduce some of my classmates to the world of contemporary art and classical music. I enjoyed their excitement and was in awe of their reactions to a world that was foreign to them. It was a sense of my own strength and worth, and I was delighted and touched by their excitement. It was amazing for all of us. Sue's head was spinning with all these questions. For example, why is Lisa telling me all this? Am I some kind of experiment for her, a student in need of guidance? And then Sue decided to ask Lisa a direct question. Lisa, I feel insecure again listening to you and your stories of growing up. I have to ask you, do you think that I need a mentor, a teacher, someone who will introduce me to your world, which is unfamiliar to me? I don't want to be treated like a naive child, and in general. Lisa interrupted. Sue, I don't see you as a child or someone who needs an introduction to another world. I told you what I told you because I admire you, I love you, and I think that you are beautiful and wonderful. I want to get to know you better, and for this I must be ready to tell you about myself and about the events in my life that meant a lot to me. Lisa, can I be sure that you do not see me as some kind of student, some kind of experiment? Sue, not at all. I would never have thought that. And then, I'm too selfish not to want to be with someone who can be a doorway to powerful, real experiences for me. You may not fully realize it, but I saw so much in you when we first met, and I feel it even more now. With these words, Lisa stood up from her chair, walked around behind Sue, and hugged her tightly, not letting go for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, Lisa let go of Sue, walked around her, stood in front of her, leaned over and kissed her on the cheek, hugged her again, and then kissed her, but then they heard footsteps and stopped. It was Sandy walking around the room upstairs. Sue immediately pulled away and took a deep breath. I'm so confused and also afraid. What are you afraid of, Sue? What is there to be afraid of in our emotions, our passions, our experiences with those we care about? But Lisa, don't you understand that allowing our emotions and passions to be exposed and explored can be very dangerous? Sue, of course I understand. But think about the alternatives. A life lived in muted colors or washed out black and white, regretting not daring to be yourself. By the way, Sandy wrote a short essay about the fears that many of us associate with our sexuality, about our need to breathe on the one hand, and the fear of grasping for life on the other. But we often forget the tragedy and regret we experience when we stifle who we are and hold ourselves captive. Lisa, I would really like to read what Sandy wrote. Do you think I can understand this? Certainly. One more thing, Sue. I told you I wouldn't do anything to make you feel uncomfortable. However, you must also understand that I listen to what you tell me, not only the words, but also what your body wants to tell me. Lisa smiled and looked closely at Sue. Lisa hugged Sandy while Sue looked at them both with a fearful expression that, to her surprise, quickly disappeared. She thought, "Oh my God, what's happening to me?" Lisa continued to stare at Sue, her eyes filled with softness and confidence. She knew that Sue was at a crossroads, that her world, familiar and calm, began to collapse under the influence of new emotions that she could not control. Lisa moved closer, as if she wanted to give Sue time to realize that her fears were just boundaries that she had set for herself. Sandy, noticing the tension in the air, took a step forward, but Lisa gently raised her hand, as if to say, "Give her time." He realized that his presence might be unnecessary at this moment, and with a slight nod, he left the room, leaving the two women alone. Lisa spoke again. Her voice was almost a whisper, soothing, but at the same time confident. "Sue, I know how you feel right now. It's like standing on the edge of something new, unknown. You are afraid to step forward, but this fear is just another way to leave yourself in a familiar world that no longer satisfies you. I am not asking you to make a choice right now, but I am asking you to realize that a life without risk is not a life, but an existence. I don't want you to regret what you didn't allow yourself to experience." Sue sighed, her inner conflict reflected on her face. She looked at Lisa, trying to find the answer in her eyes, but Lisa knew that the answer was within Sue herself. This moment was critical, the moment when all rational arguments become powerless in the face of emotions. Finally, Sue spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "Lisa, I'm afraid not only for myself, but also for my family, for how this can change everything that I've built over the years. I don't know if I can." Lisa gently placed her hand on Sue's shoulder and replied, "You don't have to do this now. We can take as much time as you need. But know one thing, you deserve happiness, and sometimes that happiness doesn't come in the forms we expect." Sue closed her eyes, her thoughts racing, but a new, calmer voice began to emerge inside her, a voice that said that perhaps this was her chance to find herself again. She opened her eyes and looked at Lisa, her gaze more determined. "Okay," Sue whispered. "Let's start small, step by step, but I don't want to lose control of what's happening." Lisa smiled and hugged her. "We will do everything in a way that makes you comfortable. This is your journey, and I'm here to support you, not manage your decisions." Sue felt relieved and allowed herself to relax in Lisa's arms. For a moment, the world around her became simpler, clearer. This moment was the beginning of something new, unknown, but no longer frightening her so much. When Sandy returned, he sensed a change in the atmosphere. He walked up to Lisa and Sue, his smile warm and supportive. "Looks like we have time for dinner," he asked with slight humor. Lisa nodded. "Yes, there is still time, and I think this will be a dinner that we will all remember for a long time." Sue looked at them both, her heart still beating faster than usual, but now she knew she was ready for the next step. She allowed herself to smile and thought, Maybe this is the very moment when I will find what I have been looking for in my life for a long time. The evening continued, and although there were many questions and doubts, Sue felt that for the first time in a long time, she was moving in a direction that was truly important to her. The evening faded into night as Lisa and Sandy prepared dinner for Sue. Sue watched their interactions, how they understood each other perfectly, how naturally and serenely they did things together. It was almost a mesmerizing sight, something new, something she had never experienced in her daily life with Rick. A strange feeling grew inside Sue, a mixture of envy and admiration. At the table, the conversation flowed casually, touching on everyday topics, and at the same time hints of deeper, personal questions slipped through. Sue felt a special bond forming between the three of them. She knew that this evening was more than just dinner. It was the beginning of something new, unknown, and possibly dangerous. After dinner, Lisa suggested drinking another glass of wine and going into the living room. Sue agreed, although she knew that she should stop, but could not resist the temptation to stay in this atmosphere where her internal barriers began to crumble. She felt like she was part of something new and exciting, even if it scared her a little. When they settled down on the sofa, Lisa spoke first. Her voice was soft, almost whispering. "Sue, I want you to know that what happens between us doesn't have to define your life. It could just be a moment, just an experience that you choose for yourself. We're not here to change your life, but to offer you something new, something you can take with you or leave behind as you choose." Sandy, sitting next to Lisa, added, "We don't want to insist on anything. We just want you to know that you have a choice. You can explore this feeling, you can stop if you want, but most importantly, you are free to be yourself." Sue felt tears begin to fill her eyes. She didn't know why exactly this caused such strong emotions. Perhaps it was because she had not felt free for so long, even in her own thoughts and desires. She leaned forward, covering her face with her hands, and allowed herself to cry, knowing that Lisa and Sandy were looking at her with understanding and without judgment. Lisa carefully leaned over to Sue and hugged her gently, allowing her to cry. She felt Sue begin to relax in her arms, and this was a sign to her that perhaps Sue was ready to move forward, despite her fears. When Sue finally calmed down, Lisa moved away, but remained close, continuing to hold her hand. She said quietly, "Sue, I know you are going through a lot, but I want you to understand that here and now you can be yourself without masks, without fear of judgment. You can be vulnerable, and that's okay. We're here to support you, whoever you decide to be." Sue raised her head and looked at Lisa, then at Sandy. She felt something special forming between them, something that could change her life forever if she let it happen. But at the same time, she felt a deep inner struggle between what she always thought was right and what she really wanted to experience. "I don't know what to do next," Sue admitted quietly, her voice filled with doubt, but also hope. Lisa smiled and answered, "You don't have to know. Sometimes it's better to just let things take their course without trying to control them. Let's just be here and now, without plans or expectations." Sandy, watching them, moved closer and suggested, "How about we just be together, without deciding anything and without rushing anywhere? Let us spend this evening the way all three of us want, without pressure and obligations." Sue nodded, and the three of them sat back on the sofa, hugging each other. It was a quiet, almost intimate moment where they were just there, enjoying each other's company, without words, without expectations. Time seemed to slow down, and Sue began to realize that perhaps in this simplicity, in this moment, lies the answer to her inner questions. She felt part of something larger than herself, and this filled her with a new sense of integrity and freedom. Several minutes passed before Lisa spoke again, her voice quiet and calm. "Sue, we shouldn't rush. This moment is yours, and only you decide what happens next. But I want you to know that whatever you choose, we will be with you." Sue nodded again, but this time her nod was more confident. She knew that this moment changed her life, no matter what happened next. And although the future remained unclear, she was ready to face it, knowing that there were people next to her who would support her in any choice. The night continued to cover the city with its quiet blanket, and a new story was born in the house of Lisa and Sandy, full of possibilities and discoveries. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next